Awesome. Hey, going to start off with the most obvious thing because the first thing that always comes out that has eyes watching men's volleyball is the AVCA preseason coaches poll. And of course, the MIVA conference poll came out. You guys came in at number 6 in the AVCA and are picked number 1 in the MIVA poll. What are your thoughts on what you've seen so far polling wise?
Well, I think ultimately, for one, I think a lot of All-Americans graduated off a lot of teams across the country this last year. I think so you're going to see a lot of new faces, a lot of change in teams. So I think that was a little bit of the product of the poll. I think the teams that were a little higher are the teams that returned a little bit more, whether it be Hawaii or Santa Barbara, UCLA, Long Beach, coming off winning it, they were going to be up there somewhere, even though they graduated some main pieces. Us, being the top in the MIVA, and being ranked sync was a product of returning a couple All-Americans, along with a couple key pieces. And so I think that kind of makes up the pool. I think it's interesting, kind of like a team like Princeton. I put them pretty high. I think they return everybody. And they're going to be really good. A team like Stanford returns that core group back. I think they're going to be pretty good. So there's some teams in there that maybe are a little low that could certainly be higher by the time we get to the end of this thing, that I think are going to be pretty formidable to play.
Oh, some great stuff there, Dan. Thanks for sharing that with me. Now, what teams do you anticipate pushing the top of the MIVA conference this year?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think ultimately Purdue-Fort Wayne on paper certainly has some great pieces. They return, Pellegrin, who had international experience, and everybody's kind of talked about that, along with some other core pieces, and a setter that maybe wasn't starting the whole time, but he'll be running the offense for them, and he's really good, I think. So there's certainly a team to watch for. And then I think you got a kind of mixed bag. Like you got McKendree, who returns all their pieces, who might be a little dark horse, but they've been good each year, so it's kind of hard to call them a dark horse. Perennial powers in Loyola and Ohio State. So even though Loyola graduated a lot, it's always hard to count them out. Ohio State's got a new helm at the head, but they've got guys who train really hard, and Jake Haynes on the opposite, so they're going to be formidable. And then you got, a team like Quincy, Lindenwood, Ball State. I mean, Ball State is older. Lindenwood, people are going to underestimate, but they're always going to push you and take you. And Quincy's got a coach who's been at the helm now for a few years, who I think is doing things a really good way. So it's really hard to paint that picture of like, hey, these are the top 2 teams and they're really separated. I think maybe us and IPFW right now on paper are a little bit separated, but I think the league's going to get really interesting. And I think you're going to see some teams win some matches where you're like, oh, wow. And then you're going to see some matches where you're not surprised. But I think ultimately there's going to be a lot of up and down in terms of league play.
Yeah, there's been some really good competition in the MIVA as of recent years, probably the last 6 or so years. But with some of those names you mentioned, are there any other names to look out for in the conference this year?
Yeah, I think from an individual standpoint, you got some players with Ball State. Matt Shev's an opposite. He's a senior on that team. You got a couple setters that have been around for a couple years with those guys. You've got McKendree, who that whole core group of freshmen, sophomores are now sophomores and juniors. Their setter does a really nice job, distributes the offense well. They're not afraid to play hard and go after it. So I think those are a couple of names that kind of popped to mind. It'll be interesting because I think you're going to see some names emerge where we talked about even, a lot of first-team all-conference guys graduating. I know some of these names of some kids, but maybe the outside doesn't. You're going to see some of those names emerge. You're like, wow, this kid's really good. This guy's taking another step in terms of that. And that'll be a little bit more common in terms of when we talk about the MIVA.
Now, let's bring it into a micro perspective on your team, the Flyers of 2020. You got a solid core of talent coming back in outside hitter Ryan Coonan. You got Kyle Bouger, another senior outside, Tyler Mitchum, a junior middle, and TJ Murray, your other middle. That's a pretty good core back. What's it looking like for your team?
Well, and I think you hit those 4 guys right there, 4, impactful players for us. And I think Dalen and Stennis is in the opposite right now, and he's got some competition from a couple other guys that are, freshmen and sophomores. And I think that setting position, a libero position, I think, Marty Jepson, who was the Illinois Player of the Year, is kind of separating himself in the libero spot. And Kevin Calling is competing with Ryan Van Leeuwen, that setting spot for us. And I think 2 spots where, first, second contact is really important. And if those guys can establish themselves early in the season, I think it bodes well for us.
Great team, no doubt. But now we're, again, more on the newcomers side of things. Do you anticipate any newer players, newer names to contribute to the flight of the Flyers this year?
Well, Marty, like I mentioned, Marty will be a freshman, and he's got a couple guys that are battling, but I see him kind of taking the lead right now, and he's really done a great job in the fall for us. And then, like I talked about, Kevin Colling, 6'8" setter, youth national team, has stepped in. He's physical, he's big, and is going to push for that spot right away for us. And maybe a couple other names is, Jackson Hickman, who's battling at the opposite, Cole Brillhart, who is a redshirt freshman on the outside, and Iñaki Bustamante, who's a Southern California kid who's kind of battling at that spot too. Those are some names that are some fairly new players for us. And, if that third middle spot, Joe Kessinger, is a Chicago kid, and will certainly be some invaluable time in terms of giving those other middles a breather and competing with those guys.
Well, finally, what teams, and I know the coaches love this question, who are the top contenders to the national championship this year?
Well, I jump on the bandwagon and say Hawaii. I mean, Hawaii's got the great pieces, so they're certainly going to be in the mix. But I like teams like, I think Stanford. Can they stay healthy and put it all together? And they're going to be pretty formidable. So UC Santa Barbara returns a lot of pieces and puts themselves in a good spot. You never can count out UCLA. Do you know what I mean? I think, they've got, a ton of talent in the gym and a new setter and another new outside. And so, and then you get out to Princeton. And I think Penn State's a team that's not talked about much this year that returns a junior-senior group that are pretty hungry and chomping at the bit right now. And it's being hosted out east for those guys. And so, and like we talked about, Princeton's probably got one of the best groups I've seen in a while and returning almost everybody. And out of the Midwest, I want the dark. I mean, I'd like to say yourself, but I think we'll be in a good spot to compete at the end. But I think it'll be interesting. I think a team like Purdue, Fort Wayne, or McKinley kind of charges out of the gates and really can surprise some people.
It's definitely not going to be a cakewalk through the MIVA this year. I'm just seeing the depth of talent on all the different teams. So it's excellent to see that growth in that region, as well as the EIVA. So another one here. Is there a dark horse pick if Coach Dan Friend had to pick one?
A dark horse pick.
For a national championship.
For a national championship. That's a good one. Princeton.
Oh, I like it. They had a great performance last year, and then the Super Six in Long Beach. So that's a great pick.
I'm going to throw that one out there. That'll blow everybody's mind. Princeton.
Well, hey, that's a great preview to what's coming up at the MIVA conference this year and in the NCAA for men's volleyball. It's an exciting time of the year. I appreciate you taking time, Dan.
Thanks, Rob, for having me, and we'll see you soon.